As a child, I had a very creative mind and have grown up to be a fairly competent artist. However, even an endless imagination couldn't have prepared me for the encounters I had at 8 years old and the events that had been burned into my mind. It was 1974, and my family had just moved from Quantico, Virginia. My dad was a Marine officer to Camp Pendleton Marine Corps based in California, into a 2-story duplex. Just about the time we got settled in, my paternal grandfather was murdered. A few months later, my mom's parents visited. Since we had a big family, a few of us kids were delighted to give up our beds for visiting family. Pappy got my bed, and I was relocated to my brother's bunk bed. Mark and I didn't get along, so I slept on the bottom with Daniel, with my head at the foot of the bed. At about 4 a.m., the first night, something awakened me. I didn't think anything about it and started to sleep again. However, I felt as if someone was watching me. Then I could hear very heavy breathing and felt a downward draft on my face. Scared out of my mind, I squinted my eyes and saw a hulking black figure looking like the Grim Reaper without bones, hovering over me as if staring into my eyes. I tried to ignore it, but it wouldn't go away. I even snored, but it still didn't leave. Thinking that a little movement might disrupt the nightmare, I moved towards the center of the bed, but I didn't wake up, and the tormentor continued to breathe on my face, moving around the bed and laying down beside me. Immediately, I leapt from the bed and screamed at the top of my lungs, "It's got me! It's got me!" Everyone in the family came running to see what had happened, commenting that a dark figure had disappeared in the hallway to the bedroom. Needless to say, I didn't sleep the rest of the night. What's worse, that black fiend and his lot continued to haunt me, the family, and the neighbors for years. I resorted to sleeping with an adult very close by, as often as I was allowed. Otherwise, encounters like the following were a nightly ritual. If I ever turned my head from the hallway light, which was left on for my security, the fiend's shadow would appear, and he would start panting like he'd just run a 26-mile race. Sometimes, he'd hide behind the door or in a closet. Sometimes, the whole family would hear chains dragging across the floor or glass breaking downstairs. One night it sounded as if plungers were being walked up and down the stairs. By this time, I'd mustered enough courage to investigate the sounds and saw nothing in the stairwell. Perhaps the scariest moment was the night I heard the hideous, angry laughter. As usual, something had awakened me, and I sat there wondering what to expect. Suddenly, I heard a commotion from downstairs, followed by laughter that could have come from the movies Sybil or The Exorcist. First it was one voice, then it was two, as if they were running around the first floor. Then they stopped. Suddenly, the first one started again, and I could hear it coming from up the stairs. It entered the hallway, ran to the bedroom, and brushed up against me, passing into the wall. Then the second voice started, but I didn't lie in bed waiting for it. I ran straight to my parents' room. Another time, one of our cousins came to visit, and it was decided that he and I would share a bed. Sometime that night, I was awakened to see the outline of a goat's head on my mom's wardrobe. It was kept in my room, with a bright ring in its nose and spiraling, fiery horns. As I screamed, it went away. Finally, one night, I'd had enough of the crap from whatever was haunting me. He had decided to inhabit the corner behind my bedroom door, just staring and breathing towards me. I sat up and said, "In the name of Jesus, leave me alone." Guess what? It stopped. I've never seen that thing again, and every day I thank God for the relief. However, all the haunting hadn't stopped. As recently as 1988, I've been harassed by a paranormal phenomenon. Even though we moved across the country, at times, I would wake up being dragged by my feet off the bed. I also asked my parents if they had noticed my old bunk bed, the one from California, would sometimes shake and squeak as if a couple were going at it. My dad confided that, when I was young, the bed would often make lots of noise, sometimes when I was asleep on it, which would explain why I was often awake in the middle of the night. He bolted out of his room, swearing someone was harming one of his boys, only to find us all sleeping soundly. He also said the neighbors in California, the Martins, shared similar experiences to what I'd had. The past 11 years have been pretty uneventful, paranormally, and I hope it stays that way. A few nights before the big production at my high school, the director was staying after school to work on the set's final touches. She was alone on stage when suddenly a single long blonde hair fell from above. She thought to herself, must have been Stephanie's. Yeah, it must have stuck in the light fixture when she was working on it. Still, Miss Holton couldn't shake the somewhat eerie feeling that crept around her neck. She'd had this feeling ever since the beginning of rehearsals. The next day, Miss Holton went to visit a friend of hers in the school. Elizabeth, I had the strangest thing happen last night. I was staying after, and when I was on stage, when this long piece of hair from the ceiling fell. Was it long blonde? Asked Elizabeth. Yes, why? It must have been Julie's, Elizabeth said in an eerie tone. Who's Julie? You mean you haven't heard of Julie before? Back in 1974, the drama department decided to put Romeo and Juliet for the spring production. Julie was a tall, beautiful blonde senior who was talented in every way. She was determined to get the part of Juliet. Auditions came around, and sadly, Julie didn't make the cut. She was outraged. She told the director if he didn't give her the part, she would die, simply die. If I don't get the part, Julie told him, I'll kill myself. Of course, no one took her seriously, and a few months later, Romeo and Juliet opened up. The first night, Julie was there, sitting directly in the middle of the house, staring angrily at Juliet. She didn't laugh or cry. When the play was over, she got up and left. Juliet went to the house manager and told him, my God, Julie was giving me the creeps. She just kept staring at me. Her friend comforted her and told her not to worry about it. No, she's just jealous, that's all. She won't come back the next night. But Julie came back again. She sat in the center of the house, neither laughing or crying, just glaring at Juliet. Once again, Juliet went to the house manager and told him, she was here again, Jared. She just kept staring at me. Now, I mean it. If she comes tomorrow, give her a different seat. Yeah, okay. Sure I will. Whatever you say. Sunday was the final night, and sure enough, Julie showed up. Somehow, she got the same seat and glared at poor Juliet. When the show was over, she got up and left. The house closed, and the teachers began to knock down the set. They left a ladder center stage and a rope hanging from one of the pipes. Sometime in the middle of the night, Julie broke into the theater and climbed the ladder. She hitched a rope around her neck and hung herself. On Monday morning, she was found by a teacher. She was dead and bloated. And that is Julie's story. Elizabeth completed the story and asked, what play were you originally going to do anyway? Miss Holton gulped, Romeo and Juliet. Juliet's haunted our theater since the night of her untimely death. Sometimes she makes props disappear. Other times she makes the noise of a chair being thrown down. Of course, no one will find the invisible person whose pranks, or are they warnings, scare them. Her footsteps simply ring in the empty halls. One thing is for certain though, we know Julie had come to visit. It all started when I was about 8 years old. My family and I moved into a rented house in Haltom City, Fort Worth, Texas. This house was not really all that old, maybe built in the 50s, that's a guess. Anyway, moving in, I was outside in the front yard playing, and two neighbor boys came out and started talking to me. Eventually, I went to the house to visit and got to know these prospective new friends. While inside, I was standing in a particular spot in their kitchen when one of the boys looked at the other and then at me and says, "I wouldn't stand there if I were you." Curious, I asked, "Why not?" And the boy replied, "Because there was a ghost in that very spot one time." Needless to say, I jumped right off that spot and went outside. Then I was curious. I started asking these guys about their ghost, and they told me that their aunt and little cousin had come to visit them, and while they were in the kitchen talking and catching up, the little boy was running around in the house playing. A little bit later, the little boy walked into the kitchen and stood next to his mom. His mom, noticing him out of the corner of her eye, went to place her hand on his shoulder, and her hand passed right through him. She jumped back aghast and looked at the little boy. The kid just looked up at her, and then all the other adults in the kitchen, one by one, then vanished, and about that time, the little boy came running down the hall, screaming like something was chasing him. As a kid, that story frightened me quite a bit. But then they proceeded to tell me that they would be sitting watching TV and the channel would change or the volume will go up full blast all of a sudden, and sometimes their front door will swing wide open with the deadbolt still poking out, as if it passed right through the door or something. The boys I was chatting with had an older sister. She was about 17 or 18 years old, and one night, she was asleep and she distinctly felt someone grab her by her arms firmly and lift her into the air and start banging her into the window like it was trying to toss her out. Of course, she woke up terrified and started screaming at the top of her lungs. When her parents burst into her room and turned the light on, it dropped her and disappeared. It was never visible, but left right then. The next day, I saw the bruise marks on her arms that were shaped like someone with large hands had been squeezing them very hard. At the time, I was too scared to ever go into the house, but at the same time, I felt like they may be pulling my leg and making up these stories. That is, until one day, my parents were outside talking to these boys' parents, and they told my folks the same stories that they told me. To top it off, they said to my parents, "Some very strange things have happened in your house too, but we'd rather not talk about that." And they never told my folks what happened in our house. I'll send in another story soon. I don't know why, but I've always had experiences ever since I can remember. The experiences have been from ghostly encounters too. Well, I'd rather let you decide what the others are. I guess the reason why I draw these things towards me and others around me is that my awareness is higher than most people, or that I'm just lucky. All my life, I felt things that I cannot explain. I'll visit a new place with my family, or go on a school field trip and things will happen, or they just happen at my home. I've had very pleasant experiences, and then there were the scariest kinds. I'll tell you a few of the scary ones. Massachusetts is a very old state, with a lot of very old homes, and that's why haunted tales are not unusual. But no matter how many experiences people have or tell, no one seems to believe them. I will say that all of my stories are true. Believe them or not, that's your choice. By the summer before my 8th grade in junior high, my family, mom, grandmother, and myself moved into a new house. Ever since I can remember, things would move around on my bedroom dresser. I have crystal vases, boxes, etc. I would go downstairs and realize that I forgot something, and all the things on my dresser would have been moved completely to the other side of the dresser. Since I was the only child at the time, my grandmother was downstairs and my mother would be at work. I knew it was a ghost. However, it wasn't threatening, so I didn't think about it too much. I just let it do what it wanted to. About 3 years later, I experienced something very scary. I had a friend from school sleep over my house, and that evening, I saw someone in my room. I awoke from sleeping. I was on the floor in a sleeping bag, and my friend was in my bed. I thought my grandmother was in my room. I saw a figure pacing back and forth in front of my bed. Again, I thought it was my grandmother, so I called out to her. I thought she was just checking to make sure we had enough blankets, etc. But when it finally turned to look at me, I realized it wasn't her. It was a medium-sized man, dressed in black, with a long black cape and a hood over his head, and the whitest face I had ever seen. And one more thing, I swear that he had a mark on his face in black, similar to the letter Z. After I saw this, I turned to my friend and started yelling at my friend to wake up. When she finally did, I told her to look, and of course he wasn't there. She told me that I was imagining it and to go back to sleep. The next morning, we both went downstairs, and I told my family what I had seen. They all laughed at me, but I was serious, and my mother told me she believed me. About a week later, I was on the phone with another friend of mine, Shelly. We were talking about what we had been up to. She told me that last weekend, she and some of our friends went out at the end of the evening for a drive to a nearby cemetery. She said the three of them got out to walk around the graveyard, but she stayed behind in the car to wait. She said that when she was waiting for the others to come back, she saw this man coming towards the car at her. She then proceeded to tell me that she was never so scared in her life. She started to freak out. She quickly leaned over all of the seats of the car to make sure the car door was locked, and when she looked up, the man was still walking towards her in the car. She then described the man to me on the phone, and she described him to the T as the man that I saw in my room that same weekend. I was speechless on the phone and just listened to her story. I didn't tell her about my visit from the man, who I call the Z-Man. About a month passed after that, and I finally told her my story. She was shocked and thought I was making it up. I told her I wanted to tell her that night she called me, but I was so scared that I just couldn't. 2 months passed, towards the end of the summer. Shelly and I and some of our friends went to the drive-in theater. She and I had to go to the restroom. As we waited in line, we turned to look on the wall and saw, written black, was "The Z-Man is coming." We then both looked at each other and ran out of there as fast as we could. All I know is that it was evil, and I didn't want to find out if he or it was coming again or not. I haven't saw this man since 1989, or at least not that I can remember, but nor do I want to. Then again, I live in Florida now, and maybe that could be a reason why he hasn't made an appearance. Thanks for reading. It all happened when I was at my old house, which was a rather smallish farmhouse. There I lived with my mother, father, and 17-year-old brother. I was always a little suspicious, but not greatly into anything like ghosts in any big way or manner. Little things would always happen around the house, things like books falling off shelves, vases, etc. But no one really took any particular notice. Everyone else in my family simply blamed it on the old house's feeble foundation. But me being a little sus, I always came to the same conclusion, that it had to be a ghost and that the house was truly and purely haunted. Especially since someone died in the old place about 10 years before we moved in. And well, that would give you the creeps, right? Well, it did a righteous turn for me, I assure you. I'm not quite sure how the person died. No one ever talked about it. Anyway, my brother used to love attempting to scare me. He would jump out at me all the time and go running past my door and screaming boo. Stupid, immature things like that. But one day, I was in my room, lying on my bed, just glancing at my door that was wide open. My brother was in his bedroom, right next to mine. I could tell this because his music was turned right up. My father was at work and my mother was, Well, I didn't have a clue as to where she was. I thought she was in the kitchen. So, I was staring at my door in the middle of the day when suddenly a shadow whisked past my door. It appeared about the half the size of a human being and seemed to almost float. I thought it was just my brother playing tricks on me, as if he had just ran past my door and was squatting to make himself look short. So I called out to him, "Very funny, ads, very funny." I looked at the door again, and once again, the thing ran past my door in the opposite direction, heading towards my parents' room to the back of the house. This time, I was freaked, but I still believed, or wanted to believe, that it was my brother fooling around. So I ran into his room to find it unbelievably empty. So, I ran back into my room and looked out my window, and there, out the front of our 5-acre block, was my mother and brother doing some gardening. I ran out the front and accused my brother of being stupid, and he had no idea whatsoever what was going on. My mother became suspicious, and we all went back into the house together. We searched the house from front to back, finding absolutely nothing to blame. Strange things kept happening around the house. We soon moved, thank God. Now that we've moved house into town, we only just found out that one of the houses around the corner, where we used to live, was also supposed to be haunted. Apparently, once a whole bookshelf fell over, almost crushing the owner of the house for no apparent reason. The world is weird, but we definitely are not alone. I mean, the world may be weird, but it wants you to share, like, comment, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. And the world expects you to hate on me forever and ever till the day I succumb to a plum. I don't know what that means. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for letting me take you on this journey through paranormal narrations throughout my channel. Nothing but horror narrations. It's kind of crazy. I don't know why I laughed. I was just thinking about how thankful I am to have you guys, really. After a tough day today, having kind of like a rough day. And just knowing that you guys are here to support me, and knowing that I can have a release by actually making a video and make myself so happy by actually just producing videos for you guys. There's nothing better than, YouTube to do that. And that's why I love being on YouTube, Despite all the demonetization that's happening, despite my last video actually getting demonetized because it's not user-friendly or advertiser-friendly or family-friendly or whatnot, life is pretty good, and I'm not going to let that get me down, that's for sure. And if anybody has any issues with that, please come to my door, and I will knock them in the tooth. Oh, there goes my demonetization for this video, too. Whoa. But seriously, guys, there's a reason why I asked for your comments. It's not because I want my money raised or anything like that. It's the fact that you guys just bring me so much joy, and I really appreciate your presence on this platform and actually being a part of this community to help make something grow, as I always try to do. And for that, I love you guys. And with that, I'll just sign out. So, guys, good night, good morning. Love you, and I'll see you in the next video.